This video I'm going to go over how to use the Create WorkSet application specifically for if you are not an ODOT employee and you're trying to create a workset within a ProjectWise data source. If that doesn't describe what you're trying to do, go check out my other videos on this application. This should be one for what you're trying to do. First thing you want to do is start the application. So you can find that within the workspace. So there's my OhioDOT CEV02 workspace. You should see a standards folder and then applications folder. And then within that applications folder, you should see this OhioDOT create workset executable. Now, if you are running this from a V2 workspace, the sync tool will have automatically added the dependencies. So you notice in my dependency viewer, I see 6 DLLs, which are needed to run this file or to use this application. If you're starting this from like a V1 workspace, that sync tool does not have that. So what you want to make sure is that these get copied out. So the easiest way to do that is just right click on applications and do copy out. So right here, copy out. But again, it's only if you don't see this dependencies. So I'm going to double click on this application and I will launch it, and it copied out all those and launched the application. And now the first time you open it, it will be blank. So the first step is to in this red area. So the way this application works is the section is red that you need to fix, and then the next section, once you fix, will become enabled. So you notice this lower sections, all these are pretty much all grayed out because I haven't gotten through the section above it yet. So since we're inside ProjectWise, first thing we want to do is check on ProjectWise. It's going to ask us to log into the data source. So you'll choose your data source in your authentication, and it'll go ahead and log you in, and then it will display the data source name right here. So now we need to tell the application what workspace we're dealing with. So we're going to hit the search button, and we're going to go and select that workspace. So I'll go into my demo workspace, and I will select this workspace. And so what it will do is it will validate the workspace to make sure that it has everything it needs in order to create a workset. If it doesn't have everything it needs, then it won't let you choose that location, and the results will tell you. You won't be able to move on until you select a valid workspace. So now the next time you open this application, it will remember this location. So you will have to log into ProjectWise, but then it should remember your location. So now moving on to the next section is the mode section. So there's a create or modify mode. And then there is a templates drop down. So this is the template workset folder structure. And right now we only have one, so it doesn't really mean that much. But maybe in the future we'll have another one. Right now we only need to have one. And then the next step would be to define where you want this workset to be created at. So you notice that mine automatically came in with a location. So you can set a default location, and that's going to be through the use of a settings file. So if we take a look at the results, it says that it found the setting file and it copied it out, and then it set a bunch of things. And then it said the workspace was validated. So that settings file can be found inside the workspace local folder, and you should see application settings folder, and then here is this create workset defaults text file. So this is what the application will read in when you select a workspace if it finds one, and it'll set a bunch of defaults. So the first one doesn't really matter since I already mentioned we only have one template right now, but you can set the default template to use. The next two lines are for if you're running outside of ProjectWise, so you don't have to worry about them running inside ProjectWise. Now, these two lines are where you can set something up. So by default, when you run the installer for the V2 workspace, it will create this file for you. But the workset location will be blank. So you're going to want to come in here and set a default location. If you don't want to, you don't have to. But that's just what sets this up. So this default location will get set here. Now, if you want to let your users change that default location, that's what this is. So if it's set to true, then this will be enabled. If you set this to false, allow workset location selection. If you set that to false, then this will be grayed out, and that'll basically force them to only create worksets at your default location that is specified in the settings file. So by default, that's going to be set to true when the installer sets it up. So allow non-PIDs would be in the next section. So here we are dropping down into this next red section here. And so this is going to be the name of your workset. So typically we name them with the PID. So the PID is our identifier for a project. It's 6 digits long, and by default it's expecting a PID number. But if you wanted to put in something more descriptive, like a location or whatnot, you'd have to check on this non-PID option, and then that would let you pretty much type in whatever you want. If you want to force them to only create worksets named with a number, that you could change this allow non-PIDs to false instead of true, and they won't be able to check this on or off. It'll just force them into the PID option. Okay. So moving on with the application, the next setting would be the coordinate system. So all of our projects should have a coordinate system. Right now there are 2 options, north and south zone. If you are doing a custom coordinate system, typically the surveyor would set that up, and then we have other documentation on how to do that. But this will give you seed files for the project with the coordinate system already set that you have chosen. In the future, in the near future, you will see that we will be adding in county coordinate systems for our LDP county coordinate systems that we'll be moving to. So in the future you'll see a lot more in this drop down. And then in the distant future, like 2025 or later, as long as things don't change from now to then, you will also see an international feed option, as that'll be where we're going in 2025, as long as things don't change from the time I record this video. So if you're watching this in the future, you might see a survey foot and international foot option to define your units for the project. But for now, we don't have to worry about that. Alright, so moving on, then now we have the 3 green sections, and the next section is kind of optional. It's there if you need to add additional folders. So I mentioned in the intro video where I went over a folder structure, we can have multiple survey and engineering folders. Specifically, if you have more than one company or consultant working on a project, you want to give them their own area in the folder structure. And so we can hit the plus button, and it'll give me a 301 survey folder, and I can put in like the company name, whatever. You can change this number if you need to set a specific 300 number. And the same thing goes for engineering. If I want to add engineering folder, I can say this is company XYZ, and I can use these minus signs to remove them. Now with the engineering folders, I mentioned in the overview video or the intro video that the structure folders is more point locations, so you need to build in those point locations. So you can have, if you have bridge work, culvert work, or wall work, you can come in here and create a folder specifically for that location. It's going to want the SFN number for the bridge, which is the structure file number, culvert file number for the culverts. The walls will just be a 3-digit number. So you can do 001, 002, whatnot. So that's how you can set up these additional folders. Moving on, it would be just to create the work set. So just to quickly recap, it seemed like that might have been a lot, but if you set up the settings file, all you have to do is come in here, log into ProjectWise, it'll remember your workspace. If your settings file is set up, it'll remember your where you want to create your work set. So literally all you have to do is come in, sign in, type in your work set name, choose a coordinate system, and hit create work set. So it's pretty simple. It's handling a lot of the work and the configuration behind the scenes for you. So now moving on to the create work set. So before I hit this button, I do want to call out this last line in the settings file, because it does indicate where it's going to grab our work set template folder structure from. So by default, this PWU's data source work area templates location is set to false. So what this means is I'm not going to use the defined area of work area templates. I'm going to use just the folder structure from within the workspace that you selected. So that is inside my workspace. You'll see there's a WorkSet templates folder inside the standards, and then there is the template folder structure to use. So if this is set to false, I'm going to go here and look at what is delivered with the workspace. And if I take a look at this workspace or work folder, you'll notice that it is a work area, and that work area does have a configuration settings block assigned to it at the workspace level. This is basically how we're going to load up our configuration. So as long as this is defined on the template, I'm going to use this template to create my new work set, and it's going to have this already on there. And then when I open a DGN within that folder, it'll know, hey, I'm supposed to use this workspace. Okay, so it kind of handles all the configuration for you. Now, if you use the installer, it will set this all up for you, so you don't have to worry. But if you checked on don't configure, then I do not add a configuration block or assign it to this template. Since you checked on don't configure, I'm going to let you do that. But if you do that manually and you set it up, you want to make sure that you're assigning this block file to this template so that when you create the work set, the configuration is already set up for you. Now, if you set this to true, what that says is, hey, go, instead of using the location inside this workspace, go and get the defined location of work areas within that data source. So in a data source, you can define a location where you keep your work area templates. So that defined location, you can put our work area or work set template over there, and then the application would use that location instead. Okay, the sync tool for V2 does not put this template there for you automatically. Our V1 sync tool did, but our V2, it does not do that anymore because a lot of people didn't like it. So I just said, fine, I won't put it there. I'll just use this default location. If you want to use your work area templates location, then just set this to true, and all you have to do is copy the template over to wherever you define that location, and then it can be with the rest of your templates that you might have for that data source. Okay. So enough on that. I just wanted to give a brief overview of how that's working. Again, by default, that's going to be set to false, and I'll just use what's inside the workspace. Okay, so now we're ready to create. So we'll come here and we'll hit create work set, and it will spin through and do that. So I'll pause it and I'll start back up once it's done. Okay, and when it's done, you'll notice it'll reset this project info section. So if we just scroll down and take a look at the results, you want to just see if there's any red. So you can find where it started, which would be right here. Copied work area template, renamed it, added the survey folder or survey master file. That's a file that goes in the survey folder. Added additional survey folder. Copied additional structures folders that we created. It then added in those wall folders, added that additional engineering folder, and then it started adding some of our seed files. So there's a pset file that gets added, a template library gets added, a DTY file gets added, and then the seed DGN files get added with the corner system set that you specified. It'll update the config file for the work set, and then lastly the CSB. So I mentioned that a second ago. That work area template had the CSB defined on it. So as long as it's defined there, when it creates the new work set, it'll make sure that it's also defined there. If you don't have it defined on your template, obviously it has no CSB to assign. And then you will most likely run into configuration issues when you go to load a DGen file. Moving on, let's take a quick look. So I said to put it over here in the work set. So there's my folder that got created. Here's the config file for the workspace or work set, and you'll notice at the top I did put what version of the application was used to create it and who was running it. just to kind of give you a little more info. And then you'll notice that it did add those additional engineering and surveying folders. If I look at the WorkSet standards, you'll see that it did throw those seed files in there. And then if I jump back up to properties of my work area, you will see that that CSP is defined. So jumping back over to the application, there is a modify mode. So if you choose the modify mode, it's going to say, hey, where is your work set that you want to modify? So I'll go and select that location. So here's where I put that. So I'll choose this work area. It's going to validate it to make sure that it is actually a work area. So if you choose the wrong folder, it won't let you. So now the modify mode is pretty restrictive. It pretty much only lets you add additional folders. So if I needed another survey folder, I'd come back in later and add that additional folder. It will not let you remove folders that are already made. I felt like that was just a recipe for disaster because I don't want to accidentally delete files that you might not want to delete. So if you need to get rid of these folders, that's going to be something that you have to handle outside the application. So same thing goes with engineering folders. If you need more, you can add them. That's pretty much all the modified does, but there might be a need to come in and add those additional folders later on. The last thing to really go over is just the help menu. So this will take you to our wiki page. We'll have these videos and a couple others about creating work sets, and then the about. Also, we'll let you know what version you're running there. So if you guys run into any problems, feel free to reach out, but hopefully it's a pretty simple application to use.